And that violence is to suppress our original qualities, to suppress our truth. It's actually a form of violence. And of course, what happens when you do that? There's an emptiness inside. There's an insecurity. And so we rely on those identities that are external to us that will then give us a sense of self. And then, of course, we defend them. And when you defend them, there's violence. Whether it's anger or whether it's physical violence. One end of the continuum is the suppression of who we are. And the other end is literally war. We move from one end to the other. What are the wars about? Identity, land, space, air. The vacuum of insecurity. But just like to come a little bit to the concept of how all of this can affect management. And okay, I don't work in a company, but I am part of a very large organisation. And I'm working at the International Coordinating Office of that organisation. We have centres in, well, actually work in about 120 countries, so it's quite large. And in fact, there's a lovely anecdote. One of the leaders of our organisation, not Daddy Janki, but the one who headed the organisation up until last August. She passed on last August. Very, very wonderful woman. And in fact, at the age of 91, Daddy Janki became the spiritual head, the administrative head of the organisation. I don't know where else that would happen. I doubt it would happen in a company, but it happened here. And somebody said to her, Daddy, I really don't think that you would understand what I go through, running my business, all the branches, all the things I have to face. And she was quiet and she said, yes, I understand. I had an organisation with thousands of branches in over 100 countries and hundreds and thousands of people working in those areas. And he just went quiet. He said, okay. And in fact, later on, he asked her, would some of your people come and help in my company? Because wherever we are, whether it's doing business, whether we're in a spiritual organisation, we're with people. And I don't like this phrase, managing people. Actually, it's not up to us to manage anybody. We can only manage ourselves. But we are with people, cooperating, working together, finding a way in which we can have the best output. And there's always this tension, in a sense, between the welfare of the individual and the welfare of the organisation. And one of the things I think that's a very important factor in our organisation is that the founder, a man, in the 1930s in India, in a very conservative society, he did something very revolutionary. He decided that it was time for women to become spiritual leaders and teachers, and to become leaders too in an administrative sense in the organisation. And, you know, for women who were not educated, didn't have a life of their own, were only answerable to whatever the menfolk around them wanted them to do, this was an absolute revolution. Such a revolution that other people in his community even tried to assassinate him. It was that much of a revolution. But those women are, of course, now today the elder members of the society, of the organisation, and they today, well, since the founder passed on in 1969, they have headed the organisation. And something that I've learnt through seeing them, watching them, and then, of course, trying to apply those principles myself in the role that I have to play, I've watched how they would always be very, very much concerned with the welfare of the individual, and the people around them. Because they've understood that if people around them, or the people in the organisation, have their spiritual, physical, emotional, mental well-being taken care of, or they're able to achieve a state of well-being, everything else that needs to happen in terms of the administration, in terms of the productivity, in our case, of course, it's teaching and sharing these things, everything else happens much more easily and much more smoothly. And sometimes we put the productivity more, we give more value to the productivity than to the welfare of the individuals who we want to achieve that productivity. And when that happens, things go out of balance, and there's tension and there's conflict. But when we put the welfare of the individual first, things work much better. And I think this is gradually what organisations are coming to understand. But I've seen for 30 years, since I've been involved with the Brama Kumaris, I've watched the elder sisters do this, and I've not seen it fail. I've always seen it create a huge amount of success. There's a statistic that Daddy Janki gave. She said, well, I used to say 90% service of the self and 10% service of others. Then she said, now I've revised that statistic. You only need 100% service of the self, and the rest will happen. That's quite a revolutionary statement. Something for us to think about. If I truly take care of my inner being, the results around me are going to be amazing.